Great. We're live.
All right. Well, good morning, good evening, and welcome to our first ever TikTok. That today we have the privilege to have with Jenny. Good evening to you, Jenny, given that you're in India.
Good afternoon and good morning, everyone.
Wonderful to have you with us. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation on this very special day.
It's great to be here. And International Women's Day is always just an inspirational, fun day, I think, for all of us.
Absolutely. And actually, what I believe is that every day should be about uh, human rights, I would say.
There you go. That's a great way to think about it.
But anyway, this is a great opportunity to remind us to support each other, to mentor others that are maybe less fortunate than us. So thank you so much to act today as that inspirational figure. And let's get started if you're ready.
You got it.
Wonderful. So, Jenny, you are a role model for women across all industries with the amazing professional track record that you have built and the inspiring leader that you are. So, who is Jenny?
What a great question. And I always sometimes I start with I'm a girl who loves math, but I think now where I am in life, I always start with I'm a mom, and I'm a mom of two grown daughters. And I often say to people, part of the reason I do what I do is to ensure that they've got role models out there and that there are others who will pay it forward for them. So I'm a mom. I'm a wife, I'm a sister, I'm a daughter. I have spent my whole life thinking about how you balance those roles on the personal side and that balance with how you balance your career aspirations. And I always say that my daughters made me become somewhat introspective, which is, kind of who am I? I'm this mother who now is introspective. And because of them, every year I think about, I do it around my birthday every year. I make a list of my trade offs of, I call it lifestyle, which is the work life balance, opportunity, which is all the great things that you get to do, like traveling the world to India and, the other 43 countries or whatever that I've been to in my life. And then compensation. What do you earn to balance these trade offs? And at different points in my life, this is why the who am I was a little hard to answer at first, is because at different points in my life I've made different balances amongst those three trade-offs. And I think that that's one of the things that's important for all women to understand, is that who you are at one stage of your career and how you balance those trade-offs can be very different than who you are at a different stage of your career and the decisions that you make.
That's absolutely great insight and so true, Jenny. So, going back to how you started your career, what made you pursue a STEM career?
I am the daughter of a math teacher, so my love of math comes from a long history. And as a kid, my dad, I got to do lots of fun things. I got to grade papers, which he didn't pay me to do, but I loved doing it. So I would grade his papers and put big red stars or frowny faces on people's algebra and geometry quizzes and tests. So I really got a good perspective. And then when I was in middle school, my dad took me and my brother over to the high school where they had a mainframe computer and taught us the basics of BASIC, the good old fashioned coding language, and learned to start coding. And at the same time, my aunt worked for IBM. And I thought she had the most glamorous career, and she'd been a math major. So I think that path just led me into being very naturally interested in math and science. And then when I started taking computer applications classes, it just felt so natural to me. And my dad always said, if you find something that you like to do, it won't feel like work.
Yeah, so true. That is so true indeed. But hard to find what you like, actually. That's one of the things that young people
But
struggle
it
with.
goes back to that first formula, lifestyle, opportunity,
Yes,
compensation, that if you don't like what you do, focus on that opportunity piece and the other pieces will work themselves out.
absolutely. They fall into place. You're absolutely right. Now, in the current landscape, and despite women's presence growing in C-suites and across boardrooms, according to the latest figures, the 2022 figures, there are still only 4% of CEOs amongst the FTSE 350. Why do you think this is still the case?
Yeah, it's a difficult question. And I say it because, it's hard for anyone to become CEO. And, and a lot of that is because you have to have had a pretty diverse set of experiences in your career. And then some of it is, luck and preparation and timing and opportunity. But I would say for women, you need to be more assertive in thinking through those movements that you make in your career. And a lot of times, people will want to shuffle you and keep you permanently in what I would call more functional roles as opposed to operational roles. If you don't get that operational experience, it would be very difficult for a board of directors to choose you. And that's true for men or women. And I think there's more men who pursue those operational roles. I think another reason that I would encourage women, as you focus your careers on the C suite, is everyone has hard times in their career. Everybody hits a stumbling block. Everybody has that moment of, oh my gosh. I have my own stories of, the best thing that could happen today is I would get fired because things were just tough. And I think you have to push through those moments. And when you're in a dual career couple and you're challenging back on that work life balance, you have to keep that fortitude of saying, okay, we're going to push through this together and get to the other side. But it is, there's moments where you're traveling a lot, it's long hours, and you have to focus back on those three things and feel good about the trade-offs that you're making at that point.
And then talking about hurdles and things that you have to overcome, there surely have been, as you said, many that you faced. So, what were any of the hurdles that now come to mind that you had to overcome in your career, and how did you face them?
It's always hard to be the one in the room who's different. And I was taught by the woman who founded the boutique consulting firm that I worked for to turn that to your advantage. And it's and so it's always trying to figure out how do you break through those conversations when you are different. And I think back when I was at IBM, I learned to talk about cars at lunch because everybody loved cars, and I actually drove a pretty fancy car. So we talked about cars at lunch. I love sports. My father was also a football coach, so you learn to talk sports. That's not to say I had a good friend who turned every metaphor that was put out there on sports into a metaphor about ballet. She just decided that was going to be her thing. So some of that in overcoming those hurdles, you have to use humor. You have to lighten the situation, and just know that unfortunately stereotypes abound. And when you find yourself constantly subject to the same stereotype, figure out how to turn it to your advantage. And a great example I use is there was a woman who worked for me, fresh out of college, new in consulting, one of the most beautiful people you've ever met in your life. And she was a math major and she was a captain in the Air Force. She was an incredible athlete. And when she walked into the room, clients didn't necessarily assume that she was there because she was a math major, leader, captain of the Air Force. And so I coached her how to talk about her experiences without walking in and saying, "Hey, I was in the Air Force and a math major," and instead how she would weave into the conversation. Oh, well, that reminds me of what one of my math professors used to always say. Or, oh, that's really similar to what happened to me when I was, at such and such Air Force base doing such and such. And so it's learning how to use to recognize those hurdles are
Right.
there, and then turn the tables on it to use it to your advantage.
Yeah. That's an excellent, actually, tip that you're sharing there with young women out there that I'm hoping will listen to us, or else we're recording this. And then this is really an excellent tip of how to turn a conversation about things that you don't necessarily come boasting into a room saying, I've done that, and or I've been there. Absolutely. Thank you for
Yeah.
that, Jenny.
Well, and it's something, I mean, I'm going to keep emphasizing that because I think, a lot of times people just want to be offended and take umbrage and stay angry about it. I can't believe they said this, or I can't believe they did that. Instead, you really do have to do a little bit of the charm offensive and, and turn it the other way. I remember a woman who worked for me when I was CIO. She always said she'd get frustrated. She'd walk in the room and be like, "Oh my gosh, do you know you're the only woman here?" And she said, "I want to know where the DBAs are. How come there are zero of those in this in this meeting? I don't care, male, female, get them in here." And she would use that to her advantage. So,
Fantastic.
it's kind of throwing it back in people's face in some ways, in a nice way.
Yep. There is research that indicates men are more likely to lean into opportunities, even if their experience doesn't necessarily meet all the specified criteria, whereas women feel compelled to meet every qualification. So, have you noticed this in your career, and how would you counsel a peer or a family member?
There are a lot of studies that validate that perception, and I think just in general, the studies show that men seem to have more confidence in their ability to overcome an obstacle and take on an opportunity than perhaps women do. So I encourage women, if there's an opportunity that's interesting, and let's say it's got five, criteria on that position spec, and you feel really good about three of them, think about your strengths and how you would use those strengths to do well in the other two. And because I think that's what a lot of men are doing. And I think that, and I would give the same advice to anyone, male or female, who was not feeling confident about taking on a role, is how do you use your strengths to overcome those gaps, and that you go in ready to say, here are the three that I'm outstanding at, and here's how I'm going to tackle these other two. And it becomes authentic, because you can't
Yeah.
be inauthentic and just say, okay, I've got all five. But doing it in an authentic fashion is really important. I will tell you, when I was named CEO at USG Corporation, and the chairman of the board called me to tell me that the board had made this selection, and we were talking about it, and he said, one of the board members asked, is she really ready? And another board member who was also a CEO said, were any of us ready when we were named CEO? And I think that that's an important acknowledgement that, men and women all, inside have that moment of, am I really ready? Can I really do
Yeah.
it? And I think playing to your strengths and having the confidence to say, well, here's how I'm going to work through those pieces, is extremely important.
Again, this is, I think, fantastic insight, and I do hope that in the audience we have people from talent retention, from HR that are listening to us, because I genuinely feel that if companies include these sort of mentorships or trainings to guide their female talent, it could make a difference. It could give more confidence and build empowerment.
And you know what? I want to add one more thing on that I think is really important for HR organizations, is to make sure that they've got really good, fair processes for all candidates to be considered. So ensuring that all job openings are posted and that people are aware, and then ensuring that all of the candidates internally who post for those have some level of conversation. If they're not ultimately interviewed for the role, at least some level of conversation of, okay, there were five criteria and you only had one. So,
Yeah.
we're not
Yeah.
even moving you on. Or, you know what, there were five criteria, you have three, there's another leading candidate, but we're going to put you forth to interview. And the benefit of that, I've seen multiple times, is women who weren't even on the radar screen for a role, who put themselves forth. HR supported them going in for the interview, and that manager maybe didn't select them this time, but knowing that that position might open up again in 12, 18, 24 months, all of a sudden now that person's name was on their list of potential candidates for the next round. And so it's a tremendous opportunity if you've got a good HR organization really following fair processes to give candidates opportunities, I think, for women to have more rapid advancement, quite frankly.
Absolutely, and it gives clear indications on which areas need to be developed if the person is to pursue a similar career as that opportunity presented. That's absolutely fantastic, and I do hope that HR people are listening to us and getting great recommendations from you, Jenny. So, as you progressed in your career, what expectations did you face about your leadership style, and how did you handle it?
It's interesting because I often get told by people, "Oh, you're really nice." And I'd like to point out that I'm not necessarily nice. As a leader, there's a lot of things that you just can't be nice about, but I do have manners. And I think that frequently people confuse having, nice manners with being nice. And I've had many people tell me, "Wow, I didn't see that conversation coming," or "I didn't see that decision coming." Because my leadership style is one where there's the right graces and manners around it, but that doesn't change the fact that accountability, honest direct conversations, feedback, and making sure that you're making the right decisions about your team, your priorities, and the way in which you're spending your company's capital doesn't change. So I think that's one of the things for women to always remember in their leadership styles, be true to the fact that you're going to make tough decisions and you have to as a leader. And it's okay to not be nice.
It is absolutely,
Yeah.
as long as you have good manners.
As long
As
as,
long
as
as you
long
have
as,
good manners,
yeah, I mean, you can be kind, you
yes,
know,
can be kind and treat people as you want to be treated, regardless
exactly.
of the
Exactly.
conversation you're going to have, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of difference indeed. So, do you think this pandemic that we went through is likely to impact leadership styles in maybe ways that we were not expecting?
I am very concerned for the younger generation in our companies and the kids coming out of college. My daughter's ages. They're about to graduate and newly graduated. That lack of return to the office, I believe, is unfair to them. I think it's very problematic because for as many companies who say it's been great, you hear from a number of CEOs who say productivity is down, teamwork is down, collaboration has diminished, training is losing ground. I mean, I don't know anybody who goes through online training without one-on-one interaction who says that it's the same experience. It's not that it's a bad experience, it's just not the same. And so I think that there's a huge dearth of good programs to cultivate the leadership that's required to manage a fully remote workforce. And I think that we really need to, as senior leaders, challenge when people say that they're just as productive at home or they're just as effective at home, because those hallway collisions, as I like to call them, where you have the 3-minute conversation, or sitting in a room and watching somebody live versus seeing them on a screen is a very different interaction. I will also say I've learned the hard way during the pandemic that online interviews versus meeting a candidate in person, they're very different. And that I think we're doing ourselves a disservice if we don't meet candidates in person. You miss the little things, and
Yeah.
some become much more positive in person, and some become much more negative in person. But the Zoom calls can mask those extremes that I really think leaders rely on to make good decisions.
No, that yeah, yeah, you're absolutely correct, and you're absolutely right to be worried about the next generation, and yeah, it's sometimes it
And
feels
I
like
know, well, I was going to say, and I know that we're unpopular in saying that, the office is a good place to be, because I understand the need for flexibility. And I think that that's one of the
yeah.
benefits of the pandemic, is that there is room for both. Hybrid is not a bad outcome in all this.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree with you. There are the hybrid solution is absolutely feasible and can be implemented in many companies, but nothing it replaces, in my opinion, that face to face, that contact, that human interaction. I absolutely agree with you, and I saw it as well with my own daughters, that one of them had to go through the pandemic during high school, and I saw the impact not being able to go to school.
Yeah,
It's horrendous.
it
It's
is.
yeah.
It is.
So no, yeah, back to office is not that
I like it.
bad. Talking about diversity and inclusion, why do you personally highly value it, and why do you think companies should value it?
So it's interesting. The university that I went to, University of Notre Dame, was all male for over 100 years. And 10 years before I was a freshman in college, the university president, Father Ted Hesburgh, opened it up to women. And his statement was, you can't be a great institution if you leave out half of the world's thinkers. And I think it's such prescient wisdom from Father Ted, who had lots of wisdom to offer on a lot of different topics. And it creates, having a broad set of, diversity and inclusion and making people feel welcome, really creates a space for all of the world's thinkers to contribute. And I think that's just good business. There are a lot of studies out there that show that it's good business. And I think that it's good for humanity. So I'm a believer in giving people the choices and the opportunities to flourish, because I think we all benefit from it.
Yeah, I hope there are other CEOs out there listening, Jenny, and getting that insight. It's diversity and inclusion is good for business. That's
Yes.
fantastic. And as we mentioned it earlier, Jenny, you are a role model, obviously, to many of us. So, do you mind sharing with us who your role model were or are?
When I was a kid, I mentioned my aunt, who was at IBM for 25 years. And so absolutely, she was more like my older sister, but I really got to observe her up close and spend a lot of time with her. And she gave a lot of great advice. But I always say there were role models from afar. And I was very fortunate at my former company. Valerie Jarrett, who became one of President Obama's closest advisors, was on our board. And she was on our board before her time in the White House. And I got to watch her, as one of two women in the room, ask the tough questions and listen intently and poke and prod appropriately. And it was tremendous for me. Another really important role model to me is a woman named Sheila Penrose. She had been president at Northern Trust in Chicago, chairman of the board of Jones Lang LaSalle, on the board of McDonald's, and really, just in some ways, just became a dear friend, a close advisor, and even today, just a great role model for me in the way that she continues to have this very broad network, very civically minded, very diversity minded. She founded the class, Leading Women Executives, that I was in the inaugural class of, and has just been terrific to me in her support and the introductions and the doors that she's helped open for me.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Jenny, for inspiring us. And what would be your recommendations to all those young talents, regardless actually of gender, who have the ambition to build a brilliant career such as yours?
So, one is know your strengths and pick the jobs that play to them. Two, and I didn't talk too much about this, but dual career couples, I think, while you have plenty of moments where, you're wondering who forgot the carpool, you also have plenty of moments where you can bounce a lot of things off of each other. And I think that that's been an important part of my success and my husband's success, quite frankly. And in that, don't be afraid to make a lateral move. Sometimes, back to getting the experience that you need, it's okay that you didn't get the next title or greater compensation. That opportunity was the most important thing at that point. So that's ultimately my advice. And then think about how that combination of your strengths and the roles that you have help fill in those gaps for the things that you want to do.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Jenny. We have 5 minutes left, and I'm just looking at the comments here to see if there are any questions coming up live with the team here. Not to. um, oh, there is a comment from a UL employee, Brahim Jilani. He says, Jenny, thank you for being an inspirational leader inside and outside of UL Solution. Your connection to your father is something many of us relate to, as well as understanding trade-off of works, lifestyle, and personal. Well, you're inspiring male talents
Well, I'll
in
give a
your
shout out
company.
to Ibrahim. He's been a terrific leader and has really been behind the scenes and out front and center in launching our e-mobility safety, and that's been in the news this week. So it's been very exciting. So thank you for that shout out.
Well, thanks to you, Jenny, for being inspirational, for all the tips that you have shared with us today. Indeed, we're celebrating Women Internationals Day, but I like to think of all the other women that do not have the same opportunities that we have, that are in emerging or developing countries. And if there are any ways that we can support, lift these women from poverty, give them back dignity, that would be terrific.
Well, and I think that's a great way to close this out, Hanan, which is if we can all find ways to pay it forward. I think about the people who helped me, who coached me, who mentored me, and I think about my girls, your daughters, and there's many out there who can reach a hand out and help appropriately. So the more we can all pay it forward, I think the greater set of diversity there will be in the workforce 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years from now. It'll just keep going.
Yeah, and the world will be a better place for all. Definitely.
Absolutely.
Oh, there is one question. If you still have
Oh,
time to take, actually from one of our members, Madhumita Guha Madi from Intertech. Hi, Maddie. Great to see that you're following. Maddie is also a dear friend. I have to say, she's been one of the greatest supporters of TIC Council India, working with your wonderful team, by the way, with
oh,
Sudhir and
great.
Suresh. So shout out to them as well. And she's asking, what are your hobbies?
Oh, my hobbies. Well, for years I did triathlons, and I did that because I love to run. I'm slow, but it clears my head. So it was just the way to get out of the house and 30 minutes in. And my very first paying job was as a lifeguard. So I am a swimmer. And then I was a well trained project manager. And I always say triathlons are the ultimate sport project management because you've got to figure out how to get out of the water and onto a bike and off the bike and start running. And it was just a great way for me to relax. And my husband and I have competed in a lot of races together. And we've got a group of friends. So unfortunately, my knees are such I've had to stop doing that, but I'm getting back into it. So and my other
Yeah,
hobbies, I love to read. I spend my life reading. I watch very little television, and I'm a picky reader. I prefer to read the classics as opposed and nonfiction as opposed to fiction.
yeah. Jenny, you are an inspirational person. You're a wonderful human being. And I wish to see more of the likes of you in boardrooms and leading companies and to inspire us all and to empower actually all talents, regardless of gender, regardless of ethnies, regardless of origin. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you
Thanks,
for
Hanan.
being our
I'm
first
so glad you
guest.
asked me. This was really fun. So always wonderful to see
Wonderful.
you. And thanks for
And I look forward to
for the
seeing
TIC
you in
Council.
Brussels.
We appreciate your leadership at the TIC Council.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you. It's fun working with you guys. Thanks a million.
All right.
So, with that, I thank the audience. I wish you a wonderful stay in Delhi. And I say hi to all your team and big shout out to them as well for supporting us to get this going.
Great. Well, thank you too.
Thank you. Bye, Jenny.